Hi, I'm Pastor Stephanie Lake from Cross and Crown Lutheran Church in Rancho Cucamonga, and I'm coming to you from my home. I thought I'd talk this few days here about how to help people that are suffering in any way. I think that the suffering around us during this time of quarantine is bad. We already see that people are anxious and sometimes sad and sometimes even feeling angry. And I think that it very well might get worse before it gets better, unfortunately. So I started off yesterday by saying that the first thing that's helpful when you are dealing with somebody and being in relationship with somebody that is suffering, the first thing that's helpful and maybe even the most important of these things is to just listen and to take in what they're saying. If you want more details about that and why that's so important and why that's so healing, you can look at yesterday's video and get more information about that. The second thing that's helpful for me that I find when I'm talking to somebody who is struggling or suffering is to think about their emotional world. So, as I said yesterday, we are not called to heal anybody. We are not called to save anybody. We are not called to fix anybody. If you are a pastor or doing pastoral care, or if you are doing Christian care as a Christian person, we don't believe that we are the savior or the healer or the fixer of all problems. And that's actually a really good thing because then it takes the burden of fixing everything off of our own shoulders. I know as a pastor, I could not go from person to person who had need after need with any kind of energy or strength if I felt that my job was to fix them or heal them, because I just simply cannot. I mean, sometimes we sit with people that are dying, and you can't make them not die. Or they're grieving a loss of a loved one and you can't reverse that situation. You can't make that pain go away. So take that burden off of you. You're not called to heal, fix, or save anybody. We are called, though, to accompany people in their pain as a Christian friend. We are called to not just run away from people in pain, but to be beside them and to support them. So after a time of listening to somebody, which might take a while, it just depends on the person and how much they need to tell. And they're telling not only about the situation, but also their feelings about it, their emotions about it. And so it helps then for the listener, in your case, you, or my case, me, for us to listen to emotional words. So it's not just about the story, but it's about how they're feeling about it. So for instance, I've shared on Facebook and also a couple of YouTube videos that I had a flooding situation in my home. Well, some people could feel that made them very angry. Other people could feel that made them very scared about what's to come next. Others could just be very sad or grieving. To others, it might be no big deal at all. So listen not just for the situation, but the emotional undertone to the situation, because that's where you can help. When I went through flooding, there were actually people that I knew that could actually help with the actual flooding. People that worked at Home Depot, for instance, and told me about some helpful equipment that could help, and other people who knew about insurance and things like that. So that's practical help, and that's really, really good. In my profession, I don't know much of that stuff, but I know more about the emotional situation. And so if you are a friend, unless you have specific resources to whatever the problem is, then you can concentrate on the emotional undertone of what's going on. So like for me, when I was going through this flooding thing, my primary emotion was, frustration, some stress, anxiety. Like, what's this going to mean if people walk through my house? They had to do some demolition and I didn't want people in this time of, the virus walking through my house. So I had some anxiety about that. So those are the kinds of emotional words and moods you can listen for. Then you can reflect to them their emotion and tell them you're just so sorry they're going through that. Now, the word sorry here does not mean you are accepting fault. It's not like you say, oh, I'm sorry I ran into you. That means like you're accepting fault for it. That's not what you mean. The word sorry here just shows empathy. So like for me, when I was frustrated with this whole flood thing, people heard that the flood was going on and they would say like, oh my gosh, that's the worst. I'm so sorry that's happening. And yeah, I could hear you're frustrated. Or, yeah, I might be frustrated too. Now, don't make it up. I mean, if you wouldn't be frustrated over this situation or whatever the emotional tone is that somebody's telling you, you don't have to say that you would feel that too, but try to be empathetic. So if somebody's telling me that they're grieving the loss of a loved one, Again, the first step is just to listen to them tell the story and then how they're feeling about it. And then when it comes my turn to speak, I reflect to them their emotions. So if they say, I lost somebody and I'm really grieving and I'm really sad and I feel very lonely and I really miss that person, then I might say, I'm so sorry for your loss. And I can understand how you would be really grieving and very lonely and really miss that person. Now, it might feel to you, if you're the one that's saying these things as the listener and then now you're talking, it might feel to you like you're not adding anything to the conversation. Because in truth, you're not. What you're doing is you are mirroring or reflecting what they're saying. And that in itself helps a person tremendously. I'm used to, in my profession, the sense that I'm not doing anything. I mean, like I used to walk into hospitals when I was first doing ministry work, and I would see somebody, lying there with cancer, and they would say, I'm really scared that I'm going to be sick for a while and then die from this, and I would listen and I would say, I'm so sorry you're going through this, and I can understand how you would feel scared, and I'd leave eventually after prayer and whatnot, I'd leave the room and I'd think, what did I do? I mean, I didn't accomplish anything. The doctors are bringing medicine. The nurses are changing bedpans and all kinds of things. And I, as a chaplain, I was like, I'm not really doing anything. Although what helped me in those times, and I was like, what am I doing? I remembered when I had those situations and somebody would do the exact same thing for me. And I felt so relieved. It's a relief to get something off your chest. It's a relief to hear somebody listen to you or to watch somebody take it in, listen to you. It's a relief to hear them mirror to you what you must be feeling. It's a relief to hear someone say, I'm just so sorry you're going through this. It's miraculous, but that's the love that Jesus talked about. It shows love when you just say, look, you're not really saying this, but you're exhibiting this truth that the person is not in the pain alone. That there's another human soul who's not hightailing it out of there because they're threatened by whatever you're going through, but staying with you and listening, expressing some sympathy or empathy. I'm so sorry you're going through this. And then somehow reflecting back that person's emotions. I can hear you're really angry and that's understandable. I can hear you're really sad and that makes sense. I can hear you're scared and yeah, I hear you. Jesus in the Bible, when he encountered people, he had to connect with them before. He's God. I'm not. Nobody else is the Savior, remember. But before he even healed people, he had to hear what was going on with them. And he had to take it in and show that he cared, that he understood, that he had relationship. And like I said, that alone is super helpful. Now, there might be a situation where you will not hear their emotional tone. You'll only hear a person say the external situation. So like in my instance, I might say, my house flooded. Like I'm only saying the external situation. I'm not saying anything about my emotions about it. Now, what you could do that's really helpful is you as a listener could assume my emotions. You could ask yourself, well, what would I think if I was going through a flood in my house? Or grieving the loss of someone, or I lost my job, or I broke my leg, or whatever it is. What would I feel? And then say this, wow, you must be feeling really frustrated, or you got to be feeling really sad about that, or I imagine you might be feeling angry. See how I'm assuming emotion? And here's the thing, either people will say, you know what, I am, and then it helps them open up more, or they will say, well, I'm not feeling really frustrated. It's more like I'm feeling anxious, which is fine. It is fine being corrected because it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. You're just assuming something to get the conversation started. But when they correct course, then it gives them a chance to more intricately examine their own emotions. So, for instance, there was somebody when I was on internship who came in to see me and her husband had died. And she was saying, yeah, he died and we had to turn off life support and then we're going to have the funeral. And so she's saying all the external stuff, but she's not saying any emotional quality as to how she's feeling. So I said, wow, I imagine you must be really sad about this. I imagine you must be grieving. I imagine you must miss him. Like I was saying those things. Now, she was not biting. She was not saying like, yes, I am sad or I am grieving, which most people do. Eventually, about 15 minutes into the conversation, she said, you know what, I'm not feeling any of that. And I said, oh, really? And she said, yeah, I really didn't get along with my husband, and he was a horrible person to live with. And I actually kind of feel like relieved now that he died. Now, no emotion is bad. It's not my job to judge a person's emotion. It's my job to help them verbalize it. And so it was fine that she corrected me. I mean, of course, she's the expert on her emotions. I'm not. I don't live in her internal world. So she corrected me and said, well, I'm feeling more this than that. And then we could talk about that. We could talk about her sense of relief. Now, as long as I come at it with acceptance, instead of, how dare you say you feel relief about your husband's death? That's not my job. I'm not judge and jury. I just say, well, tell me more about why you feel relief. Well, he was an abusive husband. Oh, well, then I could understand. And then I helped her alleviate some of that guilt she had for feeling relief after his death. I hope this makes sense. So yesterday we talked about just listening. Today we're talking about something a little bit more complicated. And that is to hear their emotional quality and reflect it back to them. Sometimes even assume their emotions if they're not saying it. And they can either agree with you or say, no, you're off and I feel more like this other thing, which then gives you the opportunity to talk about those emotions. It's healing to talk about emotions. It just is. Again, you don't need to fix it. You don't need to make them happy. If they're crying, they're not going to cry forever. You don't need to stop their crying. You don't need to tell them all will be well. That will sound trite and like you're not listening if you do that. Tell them you're really sorry and that help them feel that you understand the depth of the pain that they're going through. You do not need to take on their pain. Their pain is their pain. It's not yours. But you can tell them that you're really sorry that they're going through it. And I'm telling you, it is healing. When you do it, you might feel like I did, like I'm not doing anything. I'm not fixing it. But when you go through it yourself, when you go through pain yourself, you know how incredibly, awesomely, totally wonderful that kind of a gift is. So I hope this helps you when people are suffering or struggling in any way. You don't need to talk them out of it. You don't need to fix it. Tell them that you get it and that you're sorry. We'll talk more tomorrow. There's another important part to this. So stay tuned. Join us again on the YouTube channel. Please subscribe if you have not yet and share this with friends if you think it's helpful. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.